guys, welcome to SosinIAS Academy. This is Hima Hegde presenting before you
the current and contemporary affairs in anthropology.
Let us now learn about ADHD.
ADHD creates often unseen difficulties for students.
Graduate programs are faced with complicated challenges as they try to figure out how to support neurodiverse students. The number of students with ADHD, that is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder diagnosis, have been growing steadily since doctors began issuing the diagnosis in 1990s. At that time, however, there were no expectations of accommodations, whereas today, students with documented diagnosis are legally entitled to support. But the condition is still commonly misunderstood. Many faculty see a need and opportunity to be more effective mentors to students with ADHD. It is not uncommon for students with ADHD to be highly successful until they encounter the particular combination of stress, complexity, and many poorly defined tasks that comprise graduate students' workloads. For us, this has to raise a pressing question. What do programs and faculty need to know about ADHD and their students with ADHD to facilitate these students' success? If we were to understand it, one of us was moved, or one of the researchers was moved to learn more about ADHD, and then the researcher realized that several of her advisees had received ADHD diagnosis in graduate school. The other researchers also had students with ADHD and were diagnosed with ADHD while in graduate school itself. Together, they began to wonder where could the colleagues benefit from knowing in order to support students with ADHD effectively. The first thing students want advisors and departments to know is that ADHD is and what it isn't. Both the name, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and popular understandings of the condition can be highly misleading. While hyperactivity may be common among adolescent boys, it is not necessarily so for girls or adults. Likewise, ADHD does not indicate a lack of attention per se. Instead, it marks a brain that finds it especially challenging to regulate attention. You feel like there is tons of stimulation all the time. The level of stimulation becomes the norm, and it is hard to impose hierarchies and organization. This is the draining distraction that people with ADHD always have to manage. Living with ADHD is often living in a condition of having far too many obligations and tugs on one's attention and a weakened ability to intuitively prioritize. The students with ADHD are torn more than most between their coursework, their teaching obligations, the email obligations, their research obligations, the laundry obligations, and the obligations to their teary friend. Now, this is an average graduate student. Their brains want to go all in on every activity or not to engage at all. And all of these obligations feel equally pressing in the movement or in the moment. To have succeeded at a level that brought them to graduate school, students with previously undiagnosed ADHD are likely to have depended on one or both of two strategies. Do or die deadlines can help focus one's attention tremendously. People with ADHD may do phenomenal work with deadlines looming, but the stress that this generates can easily backfire, further exhausting already strained executive function and making it even harder to impose cognitive discipline. At the same time, many students with ADHD have learned to summon a kind of hyperattention to focus intently for long stretches of time. Dancing from task to task is challenging for many because it takes time to call up the mental reserves to tackle a new activity. Thus, while they may be adept multitaskers, when the cognitive or emotional demand of the activity isn't too high, For example, answering a straightforward email, making progress on complex problems may mean working with unbroken attention on a single task, a luxury that many of our students or many of the students' schedules do not easily allow. Let us have a look at ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is the term anthropologists use to describe the opinion that one's own way of life is natural or correct. Some would simply call it cultural ignorance. Ethnocentrism means that one may see his or her own culture as the correct way of living. For those who have not experienced their cultures in depth, can be said to be ethnocentric if they feel that their lives are the most natural way of living. Some cultures may be similar or overlap in ideas or concepts. However, some people are, in a sense, shocked to experience the differences they may encounter with individuals culturally different than themselves. In extreme cases, a group of individuals may see another culture's way of life and consider it wrong. Because of this, the group may try to convert the other group to their own ways of living. Fearful war and genocide could be the devastating result if a group is unwilling to change their ways of living. China, as the Middle Kingdom, has had major cultural influence on bordering countries extending from Japan on the north to Sri Lanka on the west. Many of these countries have their own ancient cultures and have resisted Sinocentrism even while incorporating elements into their culture and language. Kaji are symbols of Chinese origin adopted into Japanese writing. Chopsticks are the main utensils in China, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, and users regard them as superior to the Western ones. But for example, they are only used for noodles in Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia. The cultural interchange was driven by trade and the settlement of Chinese people throughout the region, but has also led to the ethnic unrest and Malaysia and Singapore separating into two countries. The population in Singapore, although diverse, being predominantly Chinese, and that in Malaysia, Malay. Another example of ethnocentrism is colonialism. Colonialism can be defined as cultural domination with enforced social change. It refers to the social system in which the political conquest by one society of another leads to cultural domination with enforced social change. A good example to look at is the British overtake of India. The British had little understanding of the culture in India, which created a lot of problems and unrest during their rule. Lastly, we have anthropology and human animal relationship. There has been a recent florescence of anthropological interest in the human animal relationships, animals in society, and animal politics in a conjuncture are often called the animal turn. Many find the turn of a humanist discipline to non human subjects perplexing and even problematic. Now, if we were to dig in, anthropologist Philippe Descola, that is, he's from France, an anthropologist from France, investigates the epistemological premises of anthropology and philosophy through ethnography, cognitive science, structural analysis, and phenomenology. Radhika Govindrajan is a professor in anthropology who is currently working on a book entitled Animal Intimacies Interspecies Relations in India's Central Himalayas, which is forthcoming from the University of Chicago Press. The book asks what it means to live and die in relation to the other animals and situates this question in the realm of everyday intimacies, that is, care, indifference, curiosity, kinship, violence, killing, and desire between human and non human animals. Laura Ogden, another professor of anthropology and in the Environment Society, has a book called Swamp Life.
This combines multi species ethnography with political ecology to understand the shifting relations of alligators, hunters, and mangroves in the Florida Everglades. Her current research project explores the poetics of loss and wonder in the Fujian archipelago. Paige West is a professor of anthropology in Columbia University. She has written about the intersections between indigenous epistemic practices and conversation or the conservation science, the linkages between environmental conservation and international development, the material and symbolic ways in which the natural world is understood and produced, the aesthetics and poetics of human social relations with nature, and the creation of commodities and practices of consumption.